Today, I want to introduce you to a real unsung hero in the sewing world, the humble sewing gauge, sometimes called a seam gauge. Now, you might have seen this unassuming little ruler in your kit and thought, what's the big deal? Well, trust me, this isn't just any old ruler, it's a proper multitasker, a real all-in-one wonder that can take your sewing from that'll do to wow, that looks amazing. So, what exactly is this magical little sewing gauge or seam gauge? Well, at its heart, it's a small ruler, usually metal or plastic, but with a very clever twist. This sliding marker. Most will have markings for both inches and centimeters, which is super handy. But this little slider, this is what makes it so much more versatile than a regular ruler. You can set this marker to a specific measurement, and then you can easily and consistently measure that same distance over and over again without having to constantly look at the numbers. It's an absolute lifesaver for things like marking buttonholes or long hems. And depending on your gauge, you might find even more cool features tucked away. Check this out, a shaped end that works brilliantly as a point turner for sharp corners. Some have these little raised notches along the edge, designed to help you create button shanks. And those little holes. We'll get to a super clever trick with the ones on the sliding bit in a moment. Plus some gauges even have holes for drawing circles. Okay, let's talk hemming. It can sometimes feel like a bit of a chore, but it's absolutely essential for that neat professional finish. And guess what? Your sewing gauge is here to make it so much simpler and more accurate. We want those hems nice and even all the way around, right? One super simple way is to just use your sewing gauge like a regular ruler. Say your hem allowance is 2 inches. Turn your fabric to the wrong side, place the edge of the gauge along the raw edge, find the 2-inch mark, and make a little mark with your fabric pen. Repeat that every few inches, then fold along those marks and press. But for longer hems, or when you want to be absolutely sure your hem allowance is consistent, this sliding marker is your best friend. Let's say your hem is 1.5 inches. Just slide the marker to 1.5 inches. Now, place the edge of the gauge along the raw edge and mark along the edge of the sliding marker as you move. Every mark will be exactly 1.5 inches from the raw edge. Fold, press, and stitch. Perfect. Now, did you ever notice these 2 little holes on either side of the sliding marker and wonder what they're for? Well, especially if you've got a lot of hemming to do, this is a brilliant little trick for super accurate and consistent results. Once you've slid your marker to the hem depth you need, let's say a nice, even 1 inch, grab a couple of your trusty sewing pins and pop one into each of those little holes on either side of the sliding marker. Push the pins down into your fabric so the sewing gauge is held firmly in place at that 1-inch mark. A quick tip here, you can place a flat piece of thick cardboard underneath the fabric, so when you pin down the sewing gauge, it's held firmly in place. Now, all you need to do is line up the raw edge of your fabric with the edge of the sewing gauge. Once it's aligned, pop another pin into your hem to hold it in place. Then, just slide your fabric along, keeping that raw edge lined up with the edge of your pinned sewing gauge, and continue to pin your hem as you go. The pinned sewing gauge acts like a reliable little guide, ensuring your hem is the same perfect depth all the way around your project. It's a real game changer for getting those professional-looking hems without all the constant measuring. But the sewing gauge isn't just for hems. If you've ever admired crisp pleats or neat tucks, this little tool is your secret weapon for marking them accurately. Say you're doing 1-inch pleats with a 1/2-inch space. Use your gauge to mark the placement lines, then use a different colour for the fold lines, measuring that 1/2-inch space in between. When you fold, just match up your coloured lines. The gauge ensures every pleat is the same width and the spacing is even. Super professional. The same principle applies to creating tucks. Just mark the edges of your tucks with the gauge to keep them the right width and evenly spaced. It takes away so much of the guesswork. Ever struggled with buttons that are slightly off, or buttonholes that don't line up? Your sewing gauge is a game changer here. Say your pattern has buttons 2 inches apart and buttonholes 3/4 inch long. Use your gauge to mark the top and bottom of each buttonhole, keeping that 2-inch spacing consistent. Using different coloured pens for the top and bottom marks can really help when you're sewing. To mark the button placement on the opposite fabric, line up your plackets and use your gauge to transfer the buttonhole positions to the button side. Just insert a pin through the top of the buttonhole to mark the spot. Then use your gauge to measure down to the next buttonhole and mark that position too. This ensures your buttons will line up perfectly. No more struggling to button up. But wait, there's more. That shaped end? It's a fantastic point turner for sharp corners on collars and cuffs. After sewing and trimming, just gently push the corner out from the inside for a super crisp point. And these little bumps, they help you create button shanks. Place the gauge under your button, stitch through, and then slide the gauge away. You'll get the perfect little space for your button to sit nicely, especially on thicker fabrics. Some gauges even have holes for drawing perfect little circles. Just put a pin in one as your centre and your pen in another to draw. Great for appliques. So there you have it. The humble sewing gauge, often overlooked but oh so incredibly useful. It's more than just a ruler. It's a versatile tool that can truly elevate your sewing, especially when you're starting out. From perfect hems to precisely placed buttons and even those clever bonus tricks, this little gadget is a multitasking marvel. Get to know your sewing gauge, use it in your projects, and you'll wonder how you ever sewed without it. What are your favourite unsung heroes of the sewing world? Share them in the comments below, and please remember to like and subscribe to support this channel.